How's it going, everybody? My name's Seamus, but you can call me Shweem. It's a new week, it's time for a new video, and this week I'm stoked to be talking about the PinePhone. Linux is all about kind of freedom to choose and self-expression, and I think that the PinePhone, a device by Pine64, really captured that very well. And I just kind of want to talk about the device a little bit today. This isn't going to be so much of a retrospective on the history of the device, while I will try and cover kind of some of the core components of what made the PinePhone special. This is more so going to be kind of my take on what you can do with the PinePhone today. In 2025, I think that the space is very interesting. The market and landscape for what you can do with the PinePhone and, well, honestly, just the availability of PinePhones is a lot different than they may have predicted in 2018 when they originally shipped it. So, today, I want to talk about my two PinePhones, and I'm just going to be kind of comparing and contrasting them a little bit and just talking about my experiences working with them. Generally speaking, just kind of in advance, I will be talking about the PinePhone in use with the keyboard case, as you can see here. It's a little clamshell and it just folds open. Your PinePhone basically just becomes a very small laptop or a little mobile PC. The first PinePhone that I'll be talking about today is the 2 gig one. So this is the original PinePhone that came out in 2018, and it is running the ARM variant of Arch Linux. So that's Arch Linux Alarm. And so that was a very easy kind of setup. There was a pre-built image that I was able to start with, flash to the SD card, and go from there. And then on the second device, the one that's currently in the case, I have actually just recently built my own Void Linux image for it, and I've been using that for, I guess, almost a week now. And Void Linux has been great on the PinePhone. I'm looking forward to talking about that a little bit more in detail later on in the video. But, I mean, Arch and Void, they've been really great on these devices. I think that they're great picks for the very kind of anemic hardware. They have very slow processors, they have very low amounts of RAM, they don't have dedicated graphics. So there's definitely some considerations that go into trying to use a device like this. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about too. Because realistically, these machines are not going to be like your primary computer. But I do want to talk about some of the things that I have enjoyed kind of trying to do maybe more intentionally when using the PinePhones. So without further ado, I guess we can kind of just start getting into it. I want to start by talking about the Arch PinePhone, as that's kind of where this whole journey began. 2 or 3 months ago is when my journey with the PinePhone started. So settling on distros like Arch and Void was honestly just the product of my research, kind of looking at what people have been doing with their PinePhones for the last couple of years. I was honestly really surprised to kind of see what was going on here. Basically what happened is that the PinePhone was designed to run these mobile Linux distributions, and while these are very cool, they're not very compatible with the hardware in the PinePhone. The original PinePhone came out with 2 gigs of RAM, and I'm not sure if there's a difference in the processing power between the first gen and the second gen. I know that there is between the PinePhone and the PinePhone Pro, but regardless, it was like either 1.3 or 1.5 gigahertz. Like, there's not a lot of hardware here. And so what happens is when you have a Linux image, even if it's fairly lightweight, in order to get all of the things that you expect from a phone, as well as all of the drivers and the support for touch and gestures, and all the weird like menus that you have to control using the side buttons and things like Phosh, it just gets kind of complicated. It gets kind of resource intensive. And I was fascinated that you could do things like opening like a normal shell on what otherwise feels like a mobile device, but the experience was really clunky. Everything lagged a lot, there was lots of delay, some things would just break. I wasn't thrilled with this. So immediately I wanted to try and figure out what the lightest option would be. Doing some research specifically on the Pine64 wiki, they have a lot of great documentation about what is supported, what's not, all the kind of specific hardware and software, specific drivers and all that you might need. But I don't think that it's like super actively maintained. It feels a little out of date. But generally speaking, the only thing that really spoke to me on the list of images that seemed truly much lighter than what I was already doing, which I believe was Alpine with Foch. So yeah, the only image that I could find that like wasn't a full-on Linux touch distribution was Arch Alarm for the PinePhone. I was a little bit hesitant at first. I hadn't used Arch yet. I was obviously very familiar with kind of the reputation that Arch had amongst the community, both for being, you know, very lightweight, very fast, very customizable, but also for, you know, I use Arch, by the way. I wasn't really interested in all that. Regardless of all of that, I realized that those things truly didn't matter, so I just went for it. Arch seemed like the best fit at the time, and honestly, I ended up being really happy with this device. The install process is really simple. The PinePhone has this cool thing called TowBoot. It's a modified version of the U-boot, and so you just flash that to an SD card. The PinePhone, the way that it's set up, it will always boot from the SD card before the eMMC, which is the internal memory. And so when you put the TowBoot SD card in and then plug your phone into a computer, it will boot into basically just flash mode, where it's ready to flash either the SD card on top of TowBoot, or you can flash the eMMC directly, which is generally what I do. I know that there's kind of some pros and cons to that. I don't have any like super fast SD cards though, so for the time being, I'm just writing to the eMMC. I get better performance that way. But yeah, so with the pre-built image on Arch, it's really straightforward. You just flash it to the SD card and you're good to go. When you turn the phone on, it boots, you get your TTY login, you'll use the default Arch like root default login. This is kind of what I was talking about in the beginning though, my kind of disclaimer about using the keyboard case. My usage here is entirely based around the keyboard case. Everything that I've done is based around me having the keyboard case with the PinePhone. I've put no consideration into using this device as like a phone. It just doesn't really interest me. This thing speaks to me, the idea of being able to have a little Linux command line with me wherever I go. It fits in my pocket, it fits in my backpack. I can do something simple like deploy a file server with it. I can use it to SSH into like my Raspberry Pis. Like, it's just convenient to have around. I treat it as a computer, and that's kind of the whole idea behind all of this. So with that out of the way, that kind of brings me to the first headache that you run into when trying to use this thing like it's just a normal laptop, is it's got a weird little keyboard. It doesn't have a traditional mod key. It has a Pine key. I like the Pine key. I think it looks nice, but it's not a standard like recognized thing. Like, it's a key press that is identified, but the keyboard layout is not standard. On both the Void PinePhone and the Arch PinePhone, I had to create my own keyboard layout where I basically just defined like the Pine key and told it to access the third row of keys on the number row, because that's where it tucks away the things like underscore and equals. Those are pretty important if you're, you know, using a command line of any sort. So getting those sorted out was pretty important. Again, on both devices, I actually had to SSH into the device from my desktop to set up the keyboard profile and then reboot, and then I was able to start like actually using the device. So that is definitely one caveat to going this route. I would like to try and just make some pre-built images that I could share somewhere. Like, the reason why I haven't is because that's kind of a commitment to maintaining and continuously building them, but it would be nice to offer images that just support the PinePhone keyboard out of the box. Another kind of funny thing about this is you have to have two separate keyboard layouts. You have to have a keyboard layout for your TTY interface, because that's a .kbd, and then you also need to have a keyboard layout for Wayland or X11 or whatever you might be doing there. If you just keep it in the TTY, then you don't have to worry about that, which is a great approach for the PinePhone, I will say. I enjoy having window managers and like, you know, proper like display server kind of thing going on, or a compositor in the case of Wayland on the Void one. But the TTY interface is just, it honestly, when you're using this device in that way, it's so snappy. You don't really ever think about the fact that it's like so underpowered until you're like compiling stuff. So yeah, that was kind of like honestly the biggest hurdle up front to setting up Arch. Once the keyboard was set up and everything was working, it was just kind of a matter of customizing and kind of getting settled in. I experimented a little bit with doing things like using FFmpeg to take like pictures and stuff. It kind of worked sometimes. It's not my specialty. There was a guy who had done it like a couple years ago, and I based my implementation almost entirely on his script, and it worked for a while and then it stopped working. Had something to do with the device drivers on Arch. Ended up just kind of not worrying about it. The setup that I ended up going for on the Arch PinePhone was pretty simple. It honestly just kind of mirrors what I have going on my desktop. It's X11 with i3 window manager, using D menu, and then I'm using ST for my terminal emulator. I was originally using DWM, ST, like the whole suckless stack, but I really like i3 specifically for the config file. I think it's just kind of nice. The suckless stuff is great, it's really lightweight, but I don't know, it's not that inconvenient, but I'm really more of a config file guy as opposed to like editing C headers and then recompiling my program from source. Maybe I'll get there one day, I'm just not there yet. So yeah, pretty much the extent of where I went once I had like the window manager going was setting up some just kind of fun things to see what the PinePhone could really do. I set up Retroarch. The only thing I ever played on it was Super Metroid. It's not a device that I'm like super interested in just gaming on, but I just wanted to see kind of what it could do. It has this weird little discrete GPU that doesn't even support Vulkan, so once I found that out, I was, I guess, kind of surprised that it ran even decently. I mean, I think Retroarch supports OpenGL, so it's probably just using that backend instead. But yeah, this wasn't like great. It's not like a beast at playing old games. I think if I were to like understand Retroarch a little bit more and kind of configure it more properly for the device, I'd probably get better performance out of it though. I also set up Qt browser. That's not like a life-changing experience, but it's totally usable. Again, with the small keyboard, the kind of keyboard first navigation layout is nice. The touchscreen also works. I made sure to get those drivers set up, so if you ever need to scroll or just kind of tap on a link, you can do that too. Overall, I enjoyed kind of just about everything about this process. It was really fun learning both about the PinePhone and about Arch, getting all this set up, and it was honestly really surprising to see all the things that it could do. Like I was saying, I pretty regularly use this as like a little SSH terminal if I ever don't feel like moving around HDMI cords or booting up my desktop. It's also just a really fun platform to have something around that I can kind of like tinker with and not be super worried about it. So I think that made for a good segue into talking about the Void PinePhone. This was honestly even more fun than setting up the Arch one, I will not lie. In my first mention of the PinePhone, in the first video, I mentioned the 3 gig one, but I specifically said that I was having issues with the internal memory. I couldn't flash it, therefore I wasn't using it. I would like to take credit for things changing, but I honestly can't. I just started messing around with it one day. I plugged it in again, as I had done many times before, and for some reason it just booted this time. Whatever was going on there really did just fix itself. I can say like with confidence that several times when I tried to boot that device, I was getting just flashing red lights, no boot, no wake up, no nothing. I don't know. I'm happy that it works. I just don't really know how to explain it. But that's neither here nor there. I was very excited when I saw this because I was like, okay, it's time. I'm working on the PinePhone video right now, and now I can have 2 PinePhones in my PinePhone video. And so that's exactly what I set out to do. When I first started, I was doing kind of the exact same search that I did when I first got Arch set up on the 2 gig one. I was like, okay, let's figure out what is the lightest, little simplest image that's not Arch that I can get set up on this PinePhone. Doing some reading, a lot of things were pointing me towards Alpine. Honestly, I'm just not very interested in Alpine. I'm not a huge fan of the way that it works. The APK package manager feels kind of clunky to me. Eventually I'd like to spend more time with it, but for now I'm going to leave Alpine as something that I have running on an EC2 instance, not on my PinePhone. Further reading eventually led me to consider Void. A very good friend of mine made the switch to Void a couple of months ago, and he's really enjoyed it. He speaks very highly of it. I very briefly had Void installed on my MacBook through Asahi Linux, and I never got it working very well, so I was kind of curious to actually get some hands-on experience with Void, and that turned into, well, the Void PinePhone. So that process was really cool. I'm definitely going to kind of skip over it. I already have a shorter video, well, not even a shorter video, a short kind of detailing the process of getting this thing all set up, but I'll kind of just go over the highlights from that. Basically, it's a two-step process. First, you have to get the latest root file system tarball for Void Linux, and then you have to use their image making tools on GitHub to build the root file system against the kernel variant of your choice. Lucky for me, they actually already had the PinePhone kernel available in their tools. So it was as simple as getting the XBPS static library. So that is the Void package manager. You can collect it in its static form to use it on other distros to build Void images. And so I collected it statically and ran it on Ubuntu to build my Void image for the PinePhone. And yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I have a lot to learn here. This was the first time I'd done anything like this, so I apologize if I'm totally butchering the steps. I was just in there with the docs and a dream, and I came out the other end successful, so something worked. But I do still have a lot to learn. So with that image built, I was now in the same place that I was at the beginning with the Arch PinePhone. I just needed to flash Void to the eMMC, and then we were off to the races. It was pretty much all of the same struggles, identical. First, I had to set up a keyboard layout. This time I had to wrestle with the Wi-Fi a bit. I actually ended up having to go back into the image that I built and just ahead of time place the configuration file for the Wi-Fi. So that way, once the phone started up, I could just SSH into it immediately. Definitely stressed me out a little bit, but it ended up working, so that was good. But yeah, the Void experience has been great. I already kind of knew what I wanted from this device because I had already spent a lot of time with the Arch PinePhone. I did the usual. I made sure to upgrade all my packages, sync all my repos. I mean, honestly, using Void feels pretty similar to using Arch. The package manager syntax is pretty simple, and the kind of do-it-yourself nature is very much still there, especially when you're starting from a minimal image like this. I would say one of the biggest adjustments I had to make moving from systemd to run it was just kind of learning how to do services. I kept getting ahead of myself and trying to start the service with run it before I created the symlink to services. That took me a little while, but once I got my head wrapped around that, really have been enjoying using Void. It's very fast, and I just feel like things mostly work. Yeah, I mean, Void's been really nice. I decided to go for a bit of a different setup on the Void PinePhone. Instead of doing X11 and i3, I opted for Wayland with Sway. I wanted to do this because I was just generally unexperienced with Wayland. I guess I still am. I only have a couple days of experience now, and the process has honestly been pretty nice. I haven't run into any crazy issues. Again, the PinePhone doesn't have a real graphics chip of any kind. It doesn't support Vulkan, but again, I think it's falling back to OpenGL and everything's just kind of working fine. Keeping things very simple I have the whole device themed to solarized light once we go into Sway, and I did this because I kind of wanted to imitate like an e-reader e-ink display kind of feeling on it. I just kind of want this thing to feel like a nice little refreshing device to use. So far it's kind of done exactly that. My actual use cases for this one, similar to the other one, are not like extensive. It's a great little SSH console, and I've also been trying to use it as like a little journaling device. There's a great project called WriterDeck OS. My same friend that is a big Void fan shared that with me recently, and I think their project's really cool. I don't know that I would commit to completely turning a device into just a like text processor. However, I did like the idea of having like a no distractions little device to just kind of get your ideas out on. And so I made a simple little bash script that just opens up my text editor in a markdown file on today's date, and it's called Journal. And so it just allows me to, whenever I want to just write, I can just type journal. And in the solarized light like Sway environment, it looks very nice. It's very pleasant, kind of distraction free. It works in the TTY as well, but I will say I'm definitely biased to the light mode look of it all right now. I'm traditionally not a light mode user. In fact, never have I ever gone out of my way to use light mode. I think it just looks very nice on this device. And I think that for these kind of like little productivity focus based tasks, I think it kind of makes sense in some ways. But that's been very pleasant. I also got this little program written in Rust called Calc. It's based on another Go based program called like GoCalc or something like that. Just kind of simple like little utilities, little like productivity things like that are kind of my focus here. I don't want to like try and convince myself that this is like any kind of like super serious machine, but at the same time I don't want to fill it with distractions. And so it's been cool kind of just keeping it on me, but keeping it very simple, giving myself kind of like different reasons to use that device as opposed to what I might normally use a computer for. I think that kind of just captures what I really enjoy about the PinePhone as kind of the intentionality of it all. I think it really captures that like true Linux experience so well. Like this is a device that it's entirely up to you, and that's true with any device, but I think the PinePhone is just so interesting because I think that kind of highlights what I really like about the PinePhone is that just kind of ease of use and the ability to focus on the expression of it all. Like, it's really not that much different than any other Linux device, but there's something about it that's just like very satisfying to work with. I don't know if it's the simplicity of using just SD cards and like plugging a phone in, or whether it's the small form factor, but it's felt very rewarding to kind of create this device and turn it into kind of exactly what I imagined in my head it could be. I think that while the PinePhone didn't end up kind of changing the world and bringing mobile Linux into the forefront of the kind of modern mobile market, I think that there's a lot of things that it did right. And I think specifically in 2025, I look at the PinePhone and I think that a bit of a beefier spec device like this would go really far. I mean, it doesn't need to be able to run local LLMs or anything like that, but even something like a little bit closer spec'd to like a modern low-end laptop, like maybe 4 gigs of RAM, maybe something a little bit faster in the processor, maybe something that supports Vulkan, like just a little bit more modern features. And I think that a lot of the current limitations that this device sees would just kind of vanish. But at the same time, those kind of limitations that it has kind of make it what it is, and so much of the joy of this experience I think comes from those restrictions and kind of learning to work within your means. Overall, I think that the PinePhone is a great device, and I'm really looking forward to continue playing around with them. I'd like to make more videos in the future covering some of the other projects that I plan to take on with the PinePhone. I talked a decent little bit about my Arch setup, and while I have really enjoyed it, I'm definitely looking for something new. I think that Void on the 3 gig PinePhone has kind of succeeded in accomplishing what I was trying to set out to do with the first one. and I just don't see myself needing both the Arch setup and the Void setup for this specific use case. And so I think my next goal is going to try and be to build a Nix image for the 2 gig PinePhone, just because I'm curious. There's documentation, it can be done, and I think now that I'm a little more comfortable getting a bit more hands-on with it, I will be able to see that through, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like. So yeah, this ended up being a little bit of a longer video this week. I had a lot of fun working with the PinePhones, and I was really excited to share this with you. Overall, I felt like this project was really rewarding. I had a lot of fun putting this video together and just kind of taking on these projects. I'm really looking forward to talking about the PinePhone and maybe more Pine64 products here on the channel sometime in the future. A lot of their stuff is pretty hard to get these days. Like the PinePhone keyboard, I just can't find them online. I would love to have a second one for both devices to have keyboards, but that doesn't seem like it's in the cards for me right now. If I do, you guys will be sure to hear about it here on the channel. I think that just about brings us to the end of this week's video though. Really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed what you saw here today, consider leaving a like, maybe dropping a comment down below. If you're new here, maybe consider dropping a sub. I make videos like this and covering the Godot game engine. I'm shooting for weekly uploads. I'm on my 3rd week here on YouTube, and I'm really enjoying the grind so far. So yeah, with all that out of the way, thanks again for joining me, guys, and I'll see you next week in the next video.